The grand oak doors of the St. Regis ballroom swung open, not with a whisper, but with the silent, commanding presence of destiny. Inside, Gregory Rothchild, a man who built an empire on audacity, was placing a diamond ring on the finger of his bride, Penelope. She was my best friend. He was my husband. They believed this was their victory, the culmination of their calculated betrayal. They didn't know that victory wasn't celebrated in a ballroom with champagne and flowers. That morning, true victory had arrived outside in a midnight blue Bentley, driven not by a chauffeur but by me. And in the back seat were his twin daughters, no longer children, but heirs to an empire he was about to lose. Life, for the first 17 years of our marriage, was a meticulously curated masterpiece. Our world was the Upper East Side of Manhattan, a universe of soaring penthouses with views that stole the breath of hushed art galleries and of charity galas, where the clinking of champagne glasses was the city's true heartbeat. I was Nerissa Maddox, and after marrying Gregory Rothchild, I became Nerissa Rothchild, a name that felt less like an identity and more like a Title I that came with immense privilege and even greater responsibility. Gregory was a force of nature. He hadn't inherited his wealth. He'd forged it in the crucible of Wall Street, turning a modest inheritance into Rothschild Industries, a sprawling conglomerate with interests in tech real estate and private equity. He was brilliant, impossibly charismatic, and possessed a ruthless ambition that many mistook for confidence. I was his partner in this ascent. While he conquered boardrooms, I conquered society. I hosted the dinners that sealed deals, remembered the names of every investor's child, and curated our home to be a sanctuary of power and taste. I was the velvet glove on his iron fist, the architect of the soft power that made his hard power palatable. I believed we were a team. Our twin daughters, Sophia and Zoe, were the center of our universe. At 16, they were beautiful, intelligent, and just beginning to navigate the complex social currents of their world. Sophia was thoughtful and artistic like me, while Zoe had her father's sharp wit and competitive streak. They were my everything. And then there was Penelope Adler. Penny, my best friend since we were both ambitious but unknown young women trying to make our way in New York. I was a gallery assistant and she was a junior editor at a fashion magazine. We had shared cheap apartments, cheaper wine and dreams that seemed impossibly distant. When I met Gregory, she was my biggest cheerleader. When we married, she was my maid of honor. She became an aunt to my daughters, a constant presence at family dinners, holidays and vacations. She was the sister I never had. I see it now, of course. The signs were there, scattered like shards of glass on a marble floor, invisible until the light hit them just right. The way Penny's compliments for Gregory lingered a second too long. The way she'd playfully touch his arm, a gesture that seemed innocent until you saw the flicker in his eyes. The way he started championing her career, making introductions and investments that saw her rise to become the editor-in-chief of a major lifestyle magazine. I had been so proud of her success, never once suspecting it was being funded by my husband's capital and fueled by their shared betrayal. I thought her constant presence was a testament to our friendship. In reality, she was studying the infrastructure of my life, looking for the weakest point to attack. The first tremor came on a Tuesday in October. Gregory was supposed to be in Zurich closing a deal. I was organizing a fundraiser for the Met. My phone buzzed with a notification from our joint credit card account, not unusual, as Gregory often used it for business expenses. But the charge wasn't from a Swiss hotel or a Michelin star restaurant. It was from a small, incredibly exclusive jewelry boutique on Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris, Bijoux de l'âme, jewels of the soul. The charge was for £75,000. It was for a custom necklace. My blood ran cold. It wasn't my birthday. Our anniversary was months away. Gregory was not a man for spontaneous romantic gifts. Every grand gesture was planned, a strategic deployment of affection. I called the boutique, my voice trembling as I pretended to be his assistant, confirming the details. Ah, yes, Madame Rothschild's assistant, the prim French voice on the line said. Monsieur Rothschild was most specific. The engraving on the back of the pendant, it is Pour ma soul et unique, P, for my one and only, P. Pideen, letter hung in the air, a single sharp point aimed directly at my heart. Penny, Penelope. My mind raced frantically, rearranging 17 years of memories, looking for the new horrifying pattern. The late nights at the office. The business trips she just happened to be on in the same city. The shared jokes I was never privy to. It was a mosaic of deceit, and I had been admiring the pretty colours, never seeing the ugly picture they formed. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the silent, cavernous rooms of our penthouse, touching the cold marble countertops, the silk upholstered chairs, the framed photos of a family that was now a lie. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Gregory returned the next day, not from Zurich, but from Paris. He strode into the apartment, all smiles and feigned exhaustion. He kissed me, a dry, perfunctory press of lips on my cheek. He handed me a box from Hermes. It was a scarf, a beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal consolation prize. How was Zurich? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Brutal, he said, loosening his tie, but we closed it. The Peterson deal is ours. He had always been an excellent liar. I held his gaze. That's strange, because our credit card statement says you were on the Rue Saint-Honoré yesterday, buying a 75,000 necklace for your one and only. The charismatic mask didn't fall. It shattered. For a split second, I saw the man behind it, cold, calculating, and utterly unapologetic. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked annoyed, as if I'd uncovered a minor accounting error. Nerissa, he said, his voice dropping the pretense of warmth and taking on the chillingly familiar tone he used in hostile negotiations. Let's not be dramatic. Dramatic, my voice cracked. You are sleeping with my best friend Gregory. You are buying her jewelry with our money, while lying to my face. How exactly should I be? He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. It was the sigh of a busy man inconvenienced. It's been happening for a while. Penelope understands me. She understands the pressures I'm under. With her, it's easy. Easy. The word was a slap. 17 years of building this life for you, raising your children, managing our entire world so you could focus on your empire. Was that easy, Gregory? Did that feel easy to you? That was your role, Nerissa. He said the words, striking me with the force of a physical blow. You were brilliant at it. The perfect hostess, the perfect mother. You managed the brand of our family. But a company needs to evolve. It needs new energy. I need new energy. He was talking about our marriage like it was a corporate merger that had outlived its usefulness. He was liquidating me. The girls came home from school. Then, their laughter echoing down the long marble hallway before they burst into the living room. They stopped short, sensing the glacial tension in the air. Hey, Zoe said, her eyes darting between us. Is everything okay? Gregory, ever the master of optics, forced a smile. Everything is fine, honey. Your mother and I were just having a grown-up discussion. But I couldn't play along, not anymore. The velvet glove was off. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at my daughters, my beautiful girls, whose world was about to be irrevocably broken. No, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Everything is not fine. Your father has decided he no longer wants to be married to me. He is leaving us for Aunt Penny. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Sophia's face crumpled, her artistic soul unable to process such an ugly composition. Zoe's jaw set her expression, hardening into a perfect mirror of her father's. But her eyes, her beautiful brown eyes, filled with a hurt so profound it took my breath away. She looked at Gregory, not with sadness, but with contempt. The divorce was swift and brutal. Gregory's legal team, the most fearsome in New York, descended with the clear objective of minimizing his losses. They painted me as a non-essential asset, a socialite who had contributed nothing tangible to his success. They argued that my lifestyle was a drain, not a contribution. They offered a settlement that was in the context of our wealth, a calculated insult. It was enough to live on, but not enough to maintain any semblance of the life my daughters had known. It was designed to erase me, to reduce me to a footnote in the grand story of Gregory Rothchild. Penny played the part of the reluctant, heartbroken friend caught in an impossible situation. She sent me text messages filled with crocodile tears. "I never wanted to hurt you, Kath. It just happened. My love for him is something I can't control." She was a consummate actress. The day I signed the papers, I sat in my lawyer's sterile office, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Gregory was there looking impatient, checking his watch. He needed to get to a board meeting. "It's done," his lawyer said. Gregory stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in his eyes, only a cold, final calculation. "It's for the best, Nerissa. You'll see." He walked out without another word. I was left alone with a check that felt like blood money and the echoing silence of a life that had been stolen from me. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. And in that moment, sitting in that soulless office, I was. But what Gregory and Penny had fatally underestimated was what happens when you burn a woman's world to the ground. You are left with a woman who is no longer afraid of fire. The fall was as swift as it was brutal. One week, I was overseeing the caterers for a dinner party for a dozen titans of industry in our 10,000 square foot penthouse. The next, I was unpacking cardboard boxes in a 3-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, a respectable address by any normal standard, but a world away from the stratosphere we had inhabited. The settlement, which had seemed so insulting in the context of Gregory's billions, now felt terrifyingly finite as I paid the first month's rent and security deposit. The girls were my shadow, their grief a constant, palpable presence. Sophia had retreated into her art, her sketchbooks filled with dark, fractured images. Zoe, on the other hand, channeled her pain into a brittle, simmering anger. She was furious with her father, but also with the world, with the injustice of it all. They would hear whispers at their elite private school, see the pitying looks from the mothers of their friends, women I had once considered my own. We were no longer the Rothschilds, the power family. We were a scandal, a cautionary tale. My nights were the worst. Sleep was a stranger. I'd lie awake, the city lights filtering through the unfamiliar windows, and the conversations would replay in my head. Gregory's cold dismissal. Penny's saccharine, treacherous texts. I saw their faces everywhere. I saw them laughing together in the Hamptons house that was no longer mine, vacationing in the St. Bart's villa I had decorated. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. For a month I allowed myself to drown in it. I was adrift in a sea of grief and rage. Then one Tuesday morning, Zoe came into my room. I was still in my bathrobe at 10 a.m., staring blankly at a television screen. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression a carbon copy of her father's, when he was about to close a particularly hostile deal. "Are you done yet?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Done with what, honey?" "This," she said, gesturing around my room at my unmade bed at me. "Being sad. He's not worth it. She's not worth it. Are you going to let them win?" It was as if she had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. Looking at my daughter, so fierce and so broken, I saw not just a reflection of her father's strength, but a reflection of a strength in me that I had forgotten existed. Before I was Nerissa Rothchild, I was Nerissa Maddox, a girl with brains and ambition who had worked her way through college and had dreams of her own. I had just traded them for someone else's. That afternoon, I made a call. The name on the card my divorce lawyer had given me was Donovan Reed. He wasn't a divorce attorney. He was a shark of a different kind, a specialist in corporate restructuring and high-stakes financial litigation. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and discreet. When I had been handed his card, I had dismissed it. What did I need a corporate lawyer for? I had nothing left to litigate. Donovan Reed's office was not in a gleaming midtown tower, but in a historic brownstone in Tribeca. The man himself was as understated and formidable as his surroundings. He was in his late 50s, with piercing grey eyes and an air of quiet intensity. He listened to my story without interruption, his face impassive. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair. "You accepted the initial settlement," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, tinged with something that sounded like disappointment. I was blindsided. I was broken. I confessed the shame of it, still raw. "Grief is a luxury, Mrs. Rothchild," he said, his voice level. "Retribution is a full-time job. Your ex-husband views you as a line item he has successfully written off. He sees you as a past liability now settled. Our job is to make him realize you are a future asset he cannot afford." "An asset? I have nothing," I said. He made sure of that. "Incorrect," Donovan countered, leaning forward. "You have 17 years of institutional knowledge. You were the chief operating officer of his life. You know his habits, his fears, his vanities. You know the players. You know where the skeletons are buried, because you're the one who was asked to clean the closets. In the world Gregory Rothchild inhabits, that kind of intelligence is worth more than gold. The problem is you've never monetized it." The idea was a spark in the darkness. He was right. For years I had managed the unmanageable. I had sourced impossible-to-get tickets for investors, arranged last-minute private jet travel to 3 continents, found tutors who could teach quantum physics to a teenager, and secured reservations at restaurants that were booked a year in advance. I had done it all seamlessly, invisibly, as part of my role as Mrs. Rothchild. What if I began the idea taking shape? I could do that for other people, for the new money, the tech, billionaires and hedge fund managers who have all the cash in the world but none of the access or polish. They don't know the right people, the right schools, the right charities. I do. A slow smile spread across Donovan Reed's face. "Now you're thinking like a CEO. You're not selling a service, Mrs. Rothchild. You're selling an intangible asset: influence, access, aura." And just like that, a name for my new venture was born: Aura Lifestyle Management. Donovan agreed to provide the seed capital and legal framework in exchange for a minority stake. He saw it not as a handout, but as a shrewd investment. My first office was the second bedroom of our apartment. My first employees were Sophia, who designed a stunning minimalist website and logo, and Zoe, who attacked market research and potential client lists with a terrifying Rothschild-esque efficiency. The first few months were a grueling lesson in humility. I used every contact I had. Many doors were slammed in my face. The women who had been my luncheon companions now saw me as the help. The men who had complimented my hosting skills now looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Gregory had put the word out that I was unstable, bitter. It was a deliberate, quiet campaign to ensure I remained grounded. But a few people remembered me for who I was, not what I had been married to. An old friend from my gallery days, now a major art dealer, gave me my first client, a reclusive tech billionaire from Silicon Valley named Kevin Chen. He had just bought a massive triplex in a new downtown skyscraper and had no idea how to live in it. He wanted art furniture, a social life, and entry into the philanthropic circles that would legitimize his vast fortune. He was my perfect test case. For Kevin, I curated a world-class collection of contemporary art. I hired the interior designer who had done the presidential suite at the George V in Paris. I got his children interviews at Dalton, the very school that was now a minefield for my own daughters. I engineered his spontaneous meeting with the head of the Whitney Museum's board at a small exclusive dinner I arranged. I didn't just furnish his apartment, I furnished his life. Word of mouth in the circles of the ultra-wealthy is faster and more potent than any marketing campaign. Within 6 months, Aura had a waiting list. My clients were Russian oligarchs, Chinese industrialists, and American tech moguls. They didn't want Gregory Rothschild's ex-wife. They wanted Nerissa Maddox, the woman who could deliver the impossible. We moved into a sleek office space in the meatpacking district. I hired a small, fiercely loyal staff. I was working 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove them all wrong. The girls saw the change in me. The cloud of grief had lifted, replaced by a storm of ambition and purpose. They were proud. For the first time in a long time, our small apartment felt not like a place of exile, but like a headquarters. One evening, I was working late when Zoe walked into my home office and handed me a tablet. On the screen was a gossip column from the New York Post. There was a picture of Gregory and Penny beaming on a yacht in Monaco. The headline read, "Billionaire tycoon Rothschild to wed editor Penelope Adler in lavish St. Regis ceremony." And the article was filled with gushing quotes from Penny about finding her soulmate and their fairy tale romance. It mentioned the date 3 months away. For a moment, the old sting of betrayal returned. But then I looked around my office at the business plans on my desk, at the signed contracts, worth millions of and my own volition. I looked at the fierce pride in my daughter's eyes. The sting faded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They were planning a wedding, a celebration of what they had taken from me. They thought I was a forgotten chapter in their story. They had no idea that I was busy writing a whole new book, and the final chapter was going to be a masterpiece. The announcement of Gregory and Penny's wedding acted as a catalyst. It wasn't just a society event. It was a declaration of victory, a public coronation, solidifying their new status as Manhattan's ultimate power couple. Penny in particular reveled in it. Her magazine ran breathless features on wedding of the year preparations, the designer gown being flown in from Paris, the 10,000 Dutch tulips being imported for the reception, the celebrity chef curating the menu. It was a vulgar display of wealth designed not just to celebrate their union, but to broadcast my obsolescence. Gregory, for his part, seemed to watch my burgeoning success with a kind of detached amusement. I heard through the grapevine, that intricate network of assistants, drivers, and socialites that now formed my intelligence web, that he referred to Aura as Nerissa's little hobby. He saw it as a quaint distraction, something to keep the ex-wife busy. He couldn't conceive of me as a genuine threat. His arrogance was his greatest vulnerability, a blind spot the size of Central Park. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Aura's success had granted me access to rooms and conversations even my marriage to Gregory hadn't. My clients weren't just the established old guard. They were the disruptors, the predators, the ones looking to unseat kings. One such client was a private equity firm out of Singapore, a notoriously aggressive group run by a man named Liam Takeda. Takeda was a legend in financial circles, a corporate raider who bought companies, stripped them for parts, and sold the bones for a profit. He hired Aura for a very specific and highly confidential task. Rothschild Industries is planning a hostile takeover of Sterling Corp, a major player in renewable energy. Takeda explained to me in our first meeting, his voice a low, precise hum. It's his vanity project. He wants to be seen as a green energy visionary, not just another Wall Street shark. It's a massive, highly leveraged deal. My firm wants to get in on the action, but not on his side. We believe Rothschild is overextended. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. This was it, the opportunity. Takeda continued. Officially, you are hired to facilitate our team's relocation and integration into the New York scene. Dinners, access the usual. Unofficially, he paused, locking his sharp eyes on mine. I know who you are, Mrs. Maddox. I know your history. I am betting that you can find out things about Gregory Rothschild's operations that my army of analysts never could. I need to know his vulnerabilities. Find me a crack in the armor, and I will pay you a fee that will make your settlement from him look like pocket change. This was more than business. It was poetic justice. Gregory had used his company to destroy my life, and now I would use my company to dissect his. Donovan Reed handled the legalities, crafting an ironclad contract with a success fee that was, as Takeda promised, astronomical. The investigation began. I assigned the official lifestyle portion to my team, while I, along with Zoe and a discreet forensic accountant, Donovan recommended, began the deep dive. Zoe was a natural. She had her father's mind for numbers and strategy, but she applied it with a righteous fury he could never comprehend. She spent hours poring over public filings, investor reports, and news archives, cross-referencing data points and looking for anomalies. My approach was softer, more insidious. I used the Aura network. I had lunch with the wife of Rothschild Industries, CFO, a woman I knew was deeply unhappy in her marriage. Over salads at the Modern, she complained about her husband's stress, the long nights, the pressure from Gregory to make the numbers work for the Sterling acquisition. I had coffee with a junior executive at Gregory's primary lending bank, a young man Aura had helped get his son into a prestigious kindergarten. He mentioned offhandedly that Rothschild had recently renegotiated his personal credit lines, leveraging a significant portion of his company stock as collateral. Each conversation was a breadcrumb. Each piece of information on its own was innocuous. But when pieced together, they began to form a disturbing picture. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. One of our Aura clients, a Russian magnate, was an avid art collector. He tasked us with acquiring a specific Jean-Michel Basquiat painting. My research led me to a private art fund based in the Cayman Islands, a notorious haven for hiding money. While conducting due diligence on the fund for my client, I requested their list of principal investors. And there it was. It wasn't Gregory's name. It was the name of a shell corporation, Rory Holdings, LLC. My blood turned to ice. Rory was the name of the golden retriever Gregory and I had owned when we were first married. It was a sentimental detail, so obscure, so personal, that only I would recognize it. With that name, Donovan Reed's forensic accountant, a quiet genius named Peterson, was able to unravel the entire scheme. Gregory was in deeper trouble than even Liam Takeda suspected. The Sterling Corp takeover wasn't just a vanity project. It was an act of desperation. Rothschild Industries had suffered massive undisclosed losses in a disastrous venture in South America. To hide this from the board and the market, Gregory was using the acquisition as a smokescreen. He was essentially trying to buy a healthy company to absorb the losses of his own failing one. But it was worse than that. To secure the financing for the deal, he had massively inflated the value of his own company's assets, and to fund his and Penny's outrageously lavish lifestyle. The yacht, the jet, the Paris shopping sprees, the upcoming wedding, he had been taking out huge personal loans against his own misrepresented company stock. Furthermore, he had been using the Cayman Islands shell corporation, Rory Holdings, to secretly buy up shares of Sterling Corp before the official takeover announcement, a move that bordered on insider trading. He wasn't just overextended, he was standing on a trapdoor, and Mr. Peterson had just found the lever. "He's a house of cards," Peterson concluded, presenting his findings in Donovan's office. "One strong gust of wind and the whole thing comes down. If this information were to be delivered to, say, the SEC or even Sterling Corp's board before the deal closes, Gregory Rothschild wouldn't just lose his company, he'd be facing criminal charges." I sat there, the thick binder of evidence on the table in front of me. It was everything I needed. More than I needed. It was a nuke. I could leak it anonymously. I could give it to Liam Takeda and collect my fee. I could destroy Gregory, utterly send him to prison, and watch Penny's fairy tale wedding turn into a perp walk. The thought was intoxicating. The rage that had simmered inside me for months boiled to the surface. I wanted to see him ruined. I wanted to see the smug, triumphant look wiped from Penny's face. But then I looked at the folder again, and I thought of my daughters. This wasn't just about Gregory. It was about the Rothschild name, the legacy tarnished, as it was that was still their birthright. If the company collapsed into a scandalous bankruptcy, their inheritance would vanish. They would be forever known as the daughters of a criminal. My revenge would cost my children their future. There had to be another way, a better way, not just to win, but to rewrite the rules of the entire game. The wedding was now just 2 weeks away. The invitation's thick cream cardstock with gold leaf lettering had been delivered by courier across the city. I hadn't received one, of course. I was the ghost at this feast. I called Donovan. "The plan has changed," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not going to Takeda, and I'm not going to the SIC, not yet." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to the wedding," I said, "and I'm going to need a very specific contract drawn up. And a Bentley for the day." Donovan was silent for a moment. Then I heard the slow smile in his voice. "Nerissa," he said, "this is going to be your masterpiece." The storm was no longer gathering. It was here, and I was directing the lightning. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect Saturday in May. In a suite at the plaza overlooking Central Park, Penelope Adler was being transformed into Mrs. Gregory Rothchild. An army of stylists, makeup artists, and photographers buzzed around her, their movements frantic and worshipful. She was the sun around which their universe revolved today. Her gown, a creation of lace and silk by a famed Parisian designer, was rumored to have cost more than a starter home in the suburbs. She was giddy radiant and triumphant. She had won. A few blocks away, in the Gothic grandeur of the St. Regis, Gregory Rothchild stood before a mirror adjusting his Tom Ford tuxedo. He checked his cufflinks, smoothed his hair, and practiced the confident, easy smile that had graced the cover of Forbes magazine. He felt the familiar thrill of a victory secured. The Sterling Corp deal was days from closing. Penny was the perfect, beautiful accessory for this new chapter of his life. And Nerissa. Nerissa was a distant, settled memory, a problem that had been efficiently managed and resolved. He allowed himself a moment of smug satisfaction. Everything was going according to his grand design. Meanwhile, in our Upper West Side apartment, a different kind of preparation was underway. There was no frenzy, only a quiet, focused calm. Sophia and Zoe stood before me, dressed not in bridesmaid gowns, but in elegant, custom-tailored pantsuits of deep navy blue. They looked impossibly chic, mature, and powerful. They were no longer the bewildered children of a messy divorce. They were young women who had witnessed a battle and chosen a side. "Are you ready?" I asked them, my voice even. Sophia, my thoughtful artist, took a deep breath. "I'm nervous, but seeing Dad with her, I can't let them just get away with it." Zoe, my fierce strategist, clenched her jaw. "He needs to see us," she said, her voice hard. "He needs to see we're not his broken-down family anymore. We're with you. We're a team." I looked at my own reflection in the mirror. I was wearing a bespoke suit, not a dress. It was the color of steel, exquisitely cut, projecting an aura of unflappable authority. My hair was styled in a sleek, severe chignon. My makeup was minimal, but flawless. I was not dressed for a wedding. I was dressed for a hostile takeover. At precisely 4 p.m., as guests were taking their seats in the St. Regis ballroom, a midnight blue Bentley Continental Flying Spur pulled up to the hotel's main entrance. The valet, accustomed to seeing the city's elite, did a double take. This car wasn't on the wedding's approved list. I stepped out first. The doorman, who had known me for years as Mrs. Rothchild, rushed forward, his face a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Mrs. Rothchild, Nerissa, I wasn't expecting—" "It's Ms. Maddox now," I said coolly, handing him a crisp $100 bill. Don't announce us. We're just going to slip in the back. Sophia and Zoe emerged from the car behind me, flanking me like a royal guard. We didn't walk towards the ballroom. Instead, we took the private elevator to the presidential suite, where I knew Gregory would be having a final glass of scotch with his best man before the ceremony. We didn't knock. I pushed the door open and walked in. Gregory was standing by the window, his back to us. His best man, a hedge fund manager named Robert, saw us first. His jaw dropped. "Gregory," he stammered. Gregory turned a mild annoyance on his face, expecting a hotel staffer. When he saw us, the glass of scotch in his hand trembled just for a second. The colour drained from his face. He stared at me, then at his daughters standing tall and defiant beside me. The sight of them dressed not for a party, but for battle seemed to unnerve him more than anything. "Nerissa." He finally managed his voice, a hoarse whisper. "What in God's name are you doing here? And girls, you shouldn't be here. Close the door." "Robert," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Robert, looking terrified, scurried out of the room, shutting the heavy door behind him. "We need to talk, Gregory," I said, walking further into the room. I placed my leather briefcase on the antique coffee table and clicked it open. "There's nothing to talk about," he hissed, regaining some of his bluster. "Our business is concluded. You are trespassing. Get out before I have security remove you." "Your security works for the St. Regis," I countered calmly, "and the St. Regis is a valued client of Aura Lifestyle Management. They won't be removing me." I let that sink in. "As for our business, you're mistaken. It is very much unfinished." I took a single thick document out of my briefcase and placed it on the table. It was bound in dark blue leather. "What is that?" he asked. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Let's call it a strategic proposal," I said. "A last-minute amendment to your life's trajectory." I opened it to the first page, a summary of Mr. Peterson's findings. It details the massive undisclosed losses from your Peruvian lithium mine venture. It outlines how you've misrepresented company assets to every single one of your lenders to secure the financing for the Sterling Corp deal. It includes a complete transaction history of a shell corporation called Rory Holdings LLC, which I believe you used to engage in a bit of insider trading. Gregory's face went from pale to ashen. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He stumbled back a step, his hand gripping the edge of a chair for support. "How?" he breathed. "You taught me to be thorough, Gregory," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You taught me that information is power. You just never imagined I'd apply those lessons to you." Zoe stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a cold fire that was a perfect imitation of his own. "You lied to everyone, Dad. To the board, to your investors, to us." Sophia added, her voice quieter, but no less powerful. "You tried to destroy Mom. You thought you could just throw her away." Gregory looked at his daughters, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something beyond arrogance. It was fear. He wasn't just losing a business deal, he was losing his children, witnessing their respect for him curdle into contempt right before his eyes. I let the silence hang for a moment, thick and heavy. The faint sound of the organ starting to play downstairs drifted up a surreal soundtrack to the demolition of a man's life. "The wedding is about to start," I said. "Penny is waiting. Here is your choice. Option A, I walk out of this room and this binder gets messengered to the SEC, the US Attorney's Office and the Board of Sterling Corp first thing Monday morning. Your deal collapses. Your company is investigated. You will be ruined, publicly disgraced, and in all likelihood, you will go to prison. Penny's fairy tale ends before the honeymoon." I paused, letting the horror of that scenario fully land. Or, I continued, sliding a second much thinner document across the table, there is option B. He stared at the new document as if it were a venomous snake. It was a legal contract drawn up by Donovan Reed, a work of brutal, beautiful precision. "Option B is this," I explained. You will go downstairs and marry Penelope. You will give her the wedding she's so proud of. But tomorrow, you will sign this. This document transfers your controlling interest, 51% of all Rothschild family assets, including the company and the family trust, into a new, irrevocable holding company. A holding company managed by me as trustee on behalf of the sole beneficiaries, Sophia and Zoe. He stared at me, uncomprehending. You want to take my company? No, Gregory, I corrected him gently. I am saving your company for your daughters. You will retain the title of CEO. You will keep a handsome salary and your seat on the board. You will continue to be the public face of Rothschild Industries. You will have your reputation, your freedom, and your new wife. But your power, your final decision-making authority, that's gone. It will belong to this holding company. It will belong to me to manage on their behalf. Every major financial decision, every acquisition, every significant expenditure will require my signature. You will be a king in title, but a prisoner on the throne. And this, I tapped the binder of evidence, disappears forever. He sank into the chair, the fight completely gone from him. He was a master negotiator who had just been checkmated. He looked from the binder that promised his destruction to the contract that promised his salvation, albeit a humiliating one. He looked at his daughters, their faces set and resolute. He had lost. He had lost completely. You will go downstairs, I commanded softly. You will smile. You will say, I do. And you will put on the best performance of your life, because your entire future, what little of it you have left to control, depends on it. I turned and walked to the door, my daughters falling into step beside me. I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at the broken man in the Tom Ford tuxedo. By the way, Gregory, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Congratulations on your wedding day. Then we walked out, leaving him alone with the ruins of his empire and the sound of his wedding march beginning downstairs. We didn't stay for the ceremony. Our role in the day's drama was complete. The bomb had been planted, the timer set. To remain would have been to revel in the destruction, and my purpose was never about simple vengeance. It was about reconstruction. As we stepped out of the St. Regis, leaving the stifling air of deceit behind the late afternoon sun of Manhattan, felt like a benediction. The city, which for months had seemed like a landscape of hostile territory and painful memories, now appeared vibrant, filled with promise. The valet brought the midnight blue Bentley around, and the three of us slipped into the cool, silent cabin. The car glided away from the curb, a vessel of quiet triumph, navigating a sea of oblivious traffic. In the rearview mirror, the Grand Hotel shrank a monument to a life I no longer wanted, and a battle I had just definitively won. I looked at my daughters. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading from their faces, replaced by something softer, more profound. Sophia, my artist, leaned her head on my shoulder, a simple gesture of trust and relief that spoke volumes. Zoe, my fierce strategist, reached across the seat and took my hand. Her grip was firm, a silent acknowledgement of our shared victory. It's over, Sophia whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. No, Zoe corrected, her gaze fixed on the city blurring past her window. It's just beginning. She was right. This wasn't an ending. It was an inauguration. The silent ride back to our apartment wasn't filled with gloating or celebration. It was filled with a sense of profound peace, the kind that comes only after a long and brutal war. We had walked into the heart of the enemy's camp, not with swords and shields, but with intelligence and leverage, and we had emerged with the keys to the kingdom. Downstairs in the St. Regis's opulent ballroom, Gregory Rothchild walked down the aisle on legs that felt like hollow reeds. The organ music swelled a triumphant score for a tragedy only he could perceive. The guests, a glittering assembly of New York's elite, saw only a powerful man about to marry his beautiful bride. They remarked on his pallor, the tightness around his eyes, and charitably dismissed it as pre-wedding jitters. They couldn't see the abyss that had opened at his feet. When he stood at the altar opposite Penny, resplendent in her Parisian gown and $1 million worth of diamonds, he didn't see a partner or a soulmate. He saw the shimmering, beautiful architect of his absolute ruin. Her ambition, her cloying adoration, her relentless desire for the life he commanded it, had all led him directly to this moment of emasculating surrender. Every whispered compliment she had ever given him now sounded like a jeer. The love he had convinced himself he felt the exciting escape she represented had curdled into a thick, suffocating resentment. When the officiant, a retired judge Gregory had once played golf with, asked if he took this woman to be his wife, a moment of pure, terrifying silence stretched. He looked out at the sea of smiling faces, and all he could see were the ghosts of his investors, the spectre of the SEC, the jail cell that had loomed so vividly in his mind just an hour before. He looked at Penny, her eyes shining with giddy, ignorant triumph. He had no choice. "I do," he said. The words were hollow, tasteless, the two most expensive syllables he had ever uttered. They were the price of his freedom. Their wedding reception was a masterclass in facade. Gregory smiled, toasted, and danced on autopilot. He raised a glass to "My beautiful bride, my future," the words feeling like a betrayal of his own soul. Penny, meanwhile, was in her element. Drunk on champagne and victory, she glided through the room, accepting congratulations, oblivious to the vacancy in her new husband's eyes. She had her millionaire, her status, her name. She had no idea she had just married a figurehead, a king who had been stripped of his crown, his army, and his treasury. The next morning, a Sunday was grey and silent. At 10 o'clock, sharp, Gregory arrived at Donovan Reed's deserted Tribeca office. He wore the same tuxedo from the night before, now rumpled and stained. His face was a haggard mask of sleeplessness and defeat. I was already there, seated opposite Donovan at a massive mahogany conference table. I wore a simple black dress. My demeanor was not triumphant or gloating. It was all business. The emotional part was over. This was mere execution. Not a word was exchanged beyond clipped legal necessities. Donovan slid the stack of documents across the polished table. "Sign here, and here. Initial here," he instructed in a monotone. Gregory picked up the pen. His hand, which had once signed billion-dollar deals with a flourish, trembled slightly. The scratch of the nib on the thick, expensive paper was the only sound in the room. It was the sound of an empire changing hands. Page by page, he signed away his life's work, his controlling interest, his power. He transferred the Rothschild legacy into a structure he could no longer command for the benefit of the daughters he had betrayed and the woman he had discarded. When the last signature was complete, he stood up. His shoulders slumped. He did not look at me. He simply turned and walked out of the room, a ghost leaving his own execution. The public fallout was a masterpiece of strategic communication. A week later, Rothschild Industries issued a press release. Drafted by New York's most cunning PR firm under my direction, it announced a visionary corporate restructuring designed to safeguard and perpetuate the Rothschild family legacy for the next generation. The creation of the new holding company was framed as a forward-thinking governance model. I was named as the newly appointed trustee and chair of the holding company's board, with a biography citing my extensive experience in private asset management and the unparalleled success of Aura. The narrative was expertly controlled. To the world, Gregory Rothschild was a genius patriarch securing his dynasty. Only a handful of people knew he was a deposed king. Liam Takeda, true to his predatory instincts, needed no official confirmation. He received an anonymous, untraceable email containing a single sentence, "The foundation of sterling is sand." He immediately and aggressively shorted Rothschild Industries stock. When the news broke that the Sterling Corp acquisition had been abruptly called off due to unforeseen financial discrepancies, the stock faltered. Takeda made a fortune. 2 days later, a case of 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild arrived at my office. The card was blank, except for a single typed word, checkmate. Life, for Gregory and Penny, quickly became the gilded prison I had designed. They had the penthouse, the jet, the invitations, the complete aesthetic of power, but the substance had been hollowed out. One evening, Penny unveiled a set of architectural plans for a lavish, multi-million-dollar renovation of the St. Bart's Villa. A new infinity pool, a screening room. We'll finally make it ours, she announced excitedly. Gregory stared at those blueprints, a wave of nausea rolling over him. We can't, he said quietly. What do you mean we can't? Darling, don't be absurd, she laughed. The holding company, the new board, they've put a freeze on all non-essential capital expenditures for the fiscal year, he mumbled, unable to meet her gaze. Penny's smile froze. The board? What are you talking about? You are the board. It's more complicated now, Penny, he faltered. Nerissa, she has to approve any expense over $50,000. The realization dawned on her face, slow and horrifying. Her fairy tale romance revealed itself to be a fraudulent business transaction. The assets were not as advertised. The furious, bitter arguments began that night and never truly stopped. My life, in stark contrast, blossomed. Aura became an international powerhouse. We moved to a stunning full-floor office in a new glass tower overlooking the Hudson. But my real wealth was measured in the reclamation of my family. The simmering anger in Zoe transformed into a sharp, protective intelligence. She enrolled at Columbia intent on a double major in finance and law, and would spend evenings with me, poring over the Rothschild Industries portfolio, offering insights that were as brilliant as they were ruthless. Sophia's art, once dark and fractured, exploded with color and confidence. She was accepted into her dream school, RISD, her portfolio acclaimed for its profound emotional honesty. She designed a new stunning logo for Aura, a symbol of our shared renaissance. We began a new tradition of Sunday dinners, not with their father in a tense formal restaurant, but with the three of us in our comfortable apartment, or later in the new warm and beautiful home I bought with my own money. My victory was never loud. It was the quiet, satisfying click of a lock falling into place. It wasn't about the fiery satisfaction of revenge, but the cool, solid foundation of security and justice. Gregory and Penny had tried to erase me, to make me a footnote in their story. Instead, I had become the author of its final, decisive chapter. They were left with a hollow marriage and the empty trappings of a stolen life, while I, Nerissa Maddox, stood at the helm of my own thriving company, the guardian of my children's vast legacy, and the undisputed, silent and absolute queen of the empire. I had rightfully and brilliantly won back. Nerissa's story is a powerful testament to the fact that the end of one chapter is often the beginning of a far more triumphant one. It's a journey from the depths of betrayal to the heights of empowerment, proving that true strength isn't about the life you're given, but the one you have the courage to build for yourself. She didn't just get even, she redefined the entire game using intelligent strategy and a mother's fierce love to secure not just her future, but the legacy of her children. Her victory wasn't just in taking back what was hers, but in becoming more than she ever was before. If this story of resilience, justice, and ultimate vindication moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of epic twists and deserved triumphs. Let us know in the comments what you think of Nerissa's ultimate checkmate.